So this is kind of like I wouldn't call it a deep dive, but like a medium dive on the whole 10,000 step thing. So when you're reading books, reading online, a lot of recommendations say make sure you get 10,000 steps in, resistance train, that type of thing. So I wanted to kind of figure out why, because everyone's recommending it, but I very rarely find why that number, that type of thing. So let's start with a brief history about why, because that's actually a really important part of this. The idea of walking 10,000 steps a day started not as science, but as marketing. In like the early to mid 1960s, there was a Japanese company called
Yamasato Keiki.
something around there. They released one of the first pedometers. It was called the Manpo Kai, which meant the 10,000 step meter. The number was chosen partially because the Japanese character for 10,000, the kanji, looks like a little running dude. Looks like a little guy walking. And because the device only went up to 9,999. It was like a little physical dial, not like what you'd expect with like a digital number. But it only went up to 9,999. So you would max out the device at 10,000. And that's kind of where that number came from. Their slogan for the device was "Let's walk 10,000 steps a day." It was catchy and easy to remember. And at the heart of it, it kind of, it was not scientific at all, but it resonated with a bunch of people. And it kind of became a fitness benchmark, and it spread worldwide. And even in pedometers today and like Fitbits and whatever, it's still like a common goal you'll find on that. But it wasn't rooted in like evil, bad intentions. It was just rooted in getting people to walk, get people out more, that type of thing, get people healthy. So on to the studies. There's more than this, but I'm going to talk mainly about 3 different studies. So over the decades, scientific research has caught up to examine whether 10,000 steps is truly necessary. For example, in 2019 in JAMA, Harvard and NIH they ran a study where they tracked around 17,000 women, roughly around 72 years old. In that study, those walking 4,400 steps a day had a 41% lower death risk than those walking just 2,700. The benefits leveled off in that group around 7,500 steps a day. This is a really deep study, kind of going over predominantly just health or being alive. But they kind of, I think, touched on other things other than just survival. But it was just studies on death, all mortality. In 2023 in JAMA Internal Medicine, there was an analysis of 78,500 adults over the span of 7 years. This mainly found that each extra 1,000 steps lowered death risk by between 6 and 11%, up to about 10,000 steps a day, after which the gains sort of flattened. This went into a lot of other benefits like cancer survival, heart disease survival, that type of thing. And we'll kind of talk about some of those benefits later. Another one in JAMA, but in JAMA Neurology, they found that walking roughly around 10,000 steps a day reduced risk of dementia by 50%-ish and lowered risk of heart failure, stroke, and several cancers. Another one in PubMed, there was a 12-week study on around 30 adults, but it started at 35, but for whatever reason, 5 weren't then taken into consideration. I believe they didn't stick to the 10,000 steps, but walking, they did a walking program where they had five days a week. They would wear a pedometer, and it lowered their anxiety, depression, fatigue. It bettered their mood, their weight, and their body composition. So like their waist circumference, that type of thing. And then some other various studies found 10,000 steps is nice and all, but other studies are kind of touching on brisk walking or walking intensity or your peak cadence. So like your fastest 30-minute walk. That gives extra benefits, not only on just 10,000 steps, but kind of there's more findings that are just coming out or yet to come out, or that not just plain steps, but what kind of steps may also offer some better benefits. So we can dig into these a little bit. The overweight, the 30 to 35 patients, where they had 35 individuals walk 10,000 steps a day. They were obese by definition. And this study also focused not only on like physical health, but mental health. It was a 12-week program. They tracked various things at the beginning and end of the test, such as mood, BMI, waist circumference, body fat percent, lean body mass. And they had to walk 10,000 steps. 5 people did not finish the program. The 30 people who did finish had significantly lower anxiety, depression, anger, fatigue, confusion, and total mood distress scores after the study. They had a higher vigor score, vigor is kind of your level of energy and your enthusiasm compared to the baseline. And the 30 people had quote unquote significantly lower body weight, waist circumference, BMI, and body fat percentage. So I don't precisely know what significantly is in that study, since it was a 12-week program, but apparently people lost weight as well as they just felt happier. So the JAMA article, finding associations of step counts and intensity with cancer and cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality. I wanted to go dig into this one a little bit more. It's done in 2023. It was in JAMA Internal Medicine, titled Daily Steps and All-Cause Mortality in Older Adults. So, as I said before, this kind of this went over 78,500 U.S. adults, men and women, around 61 years of age, and they used accelerometers to measure their steps. The participants were followed for a median of 7 years, during which 2,179 people died. 1,325 died from cancer, 664 died from cardiovascular disease. The study recorded 10,245 incident cardiovascular disease events and 2,813 cancer incidents. Walking more steps per day lowered your risk of dying overall from heart problems, from cancer, etc. But the benefits seem to max out around that 10,000 step goal. Though there were benefits over that for some people. That 10,000 kind of seemed like a random sweet spot. I can go into a little bit of the specifics here, but basically there was an 8% risk drop per 1,000 steps up to a certain point. So of all-cause mortality. So every 1,000 extra steps you got a day, your all-cause mortality risk dropped by 8%. So every 1,000 steps, 8% risk drop. Cardiovascular disease mortality, there was a 10% drop per 1,000 steps added. For cancer mortality, there was an 11% drop per 1,000 steps added. So this held up that 10,000 random number, kind of helped provide evidence that was actually a good number. And we're going to dive into that a little bit later, but that was held that number up. And after 10,000, there wasn't like a huge significant gain. To kind of dig into that study about the women in their 70s, the 17,000 women in their 70s, this was ran by Harvard with support of NIH, which is the NIH's National Cancer Institute and National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. They analyzed the daily activity around 17,000 women, with the average age being around 72 years old. They tracked any cause deaths of these women for about 4 years. They tracked the steps taken these women for a full week each to get roughly their step activity level. They published the data to JAMA Internal Medicine. Over 500 women died during the 4-year study. Women who walked around 4,400 steps per day had a 41% lower risk of death compared to those who took 2,700 steps. The risk decreased until around 7,500 steps, where the benefits seemed to level off. This wasn't intense walking. Generally, it was rated to be kind of a slower paced walk. So on that study, a lot of these are generally done in older individuals over 60, as that's just kind of what's being studied. So there's some backlash if you read about why the 10,000 steps, and it's just not like a universal magic number. So some people are pushing back on that. One of the reasons is because the original number had no scientific backing at all. It was a marketing company. It was a marketing department at a pedometer company. And it had to do with a little character, a little kanji character for 10,000, looking like a little dude. Some studies show benefits start as low as 4,000 to 6,000 steps, especially among older individuals or people who are just getting into walking. Another issue that some people find is that 10,000 is a little unrealistic for some people. So it may discourage people from walking at all, just because they get, they're trying to walk more, they get 4,000 and they feel like it's impossible. So let's just stop. Step intensity and movement breaks matter, not just the total count. So I'm trying to remember reading back. It was something like, if you sit for 8 hours a day, your death risk may be raised by 60%. But if you do 60 to 75 minutes of moderate activity, that can offset that even if you got like a very low step count, that exercise may offset that whole 60% increase. So do the steps really matter, or is it just something that for people who don't work out may help health, right? So that's kind of putting some question into that whole, do you need 10,000 steps? There's also some psychological studies that kind of showed that people who obsess over tracking every step, they're missing out on the joy of walking in general. And that kind of sounds a little at face value, you're like, really? But I understand that it's kind of like the guy who loves walking will walk longer than the guy who loves the destination, something like that. So if you're just trying to get out and get healthy, and you love walking, if you start obsessing over numbers, you might take the joy out of that and stop walking or walk less. So there's some pushback why some people don't believe that 10,000 is a goal, it should even be a daily goal for anybody. So benefits. We've kind of talked about this, but let me kind of just summarize it again. So even if the 10,000 step goal isn't perfect, it's easy to remember for all people, and it will help your health in nearly all aspects. Your heart and your circulation, for one, you'll have lower risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, high blood pressure. Your metabolic health, it'll help manage your blood sugar, cholesterol, and weight. Your mental health, reduces anxiety, depression, fatigue, while improving your creative thinking and your mood. Longevity, as mentioned before, each 1,000 steps adds measurable reductions in risk of premature death, especially up to 10,000. Cognitive health, up to 50% lower risk of dementia in some of these studies. Mobility and pain, it reduces joint and knee pain, especially people with arthritis. It's also free walking. It's accessible for most people and easy to integrate in your daily routines, making it one of the simplest quote-unquote medicines for long-term wellness. So the number 10,000, even though it was, the cart was before the horse, it seems that a lot of those benefits kind of match up with that random number a company picked. Along that same line, that a lot of the studies are based around 10,000, which people some people push back and say was just kind of influenced by that company at the beginning of this video. So a lot of the studies kind of reflect 10,000. So if that company said, let's walk 11,000 steps, all the studies might point to 11,000. But that being said, it's not like the benefits aren't there around 10,000. And there's even signs that show when you go, 12 or higher, some of those benefits do kind of drop off a bit. So there's a ton of benefits regardless of your intensity, walking 10,000 steps. There might be some more to it that science will kind of bring to light in the future about heart rate, getting your heart rate up, and that's to be seen. So in summary, 10,000 steps a day began as a very clever marketing scheme or marketing event, but it ended up inspiring a global fitness movement. Modern science shows that the more steps you get correlates with better health, though the benefits plateau somewhere between 7 to 12,000 steps as far as we know right now. The real takeaway is to move more, sit less, and walk briskly when you can. 10,000 isn't a magical number, but it's memorable. What matters most is finding a step goal that's achievable, consistent, sustainable for your lifestyle. So it might be hard to do 30 burpees, at your desk, or it might be hard to do 10 squats at your desk. But most people can get away from their desk to walk to the water fountain or walk to the bathroom. So it's something that you can easily kind of track, and a small little thing you can do to add to your overall health.